The candlelight flickered, casting soft shadows across the crisp white tablecloth, where crystal glasses gleamed and the aroma of truffle risotto mingled with the faint sweetness of the roses I'd chosen for the centerpieces. The upscale French bistro in Charleston buzzed with the hum of conversation, soft jazz weaving through the air, a perfect backdrop for our 10th anniversary dinner. I'd spent weeks planning every detail, the reservation at this exclusive restaurant, the sapphire necklace tucked in my purse as a gift for Daniel, the intimate guest list of friends, family, and his colleagues. My sister Emily smiled from across the table, her eyes bright with pride, while Daniel's colleague Mark raised his glass, oblivious to the storm about to break. I sat in my silk dress, its fabric cool against my knees, my heart full as I looked at Daniel, his familiar face framed by the glow of the candles. Then he stood, tapping his glass with a spoon, his eyes gleaming with something I couldn't place. "To 10 years, he began, his voice smooth, commanding the room. "And to new chapters. I'm sorry, Charlotte, but I want a divorce. I've found someone who truly understands me." The room froze. Forks paused midair, Mark's smile faltered, and a woman I barely knew gasped, her hand clutching her pearls. "My name is Charlotte Hayes, and at 38, I'd just been blindsided by the man I'd built a life with." But as Daniel sat down, a smug tilt to his lips, he had no idea I'd have the last word. My pulse raced, heat rising in my cheeks as 50 pairs of eyes bored into me, waiting for the tears, the screams, the collapse. The weight of the sapphire necklace in my purse felt like an anchor, a reminder of the love I'd poured into this night, this marriage. I wanted to hurl my wine glass, to demand answers, to shatter the silence with the pain clawing at my chest. But I didn't. I'd spent years closing deals, reading rooms, staying calm under pressure. This was no different. I met Daniel's gaze, my own steady despite the storm within. "To new chapters," then, I said, my voice clear, cutting through the tension like a blade. I raised my glass, the sapphires weighed a silent vow, and took a slow sip, the wine sharp on my tongue. A murmur rippled through the restaurant, Emily's fork clattered, Mark whispered to his wife, but Daniel's confidence wavered, his brow furrowing for a split second. I set my glass down, folded my napkin with deliberate care, and stood. "Enjoy your evening," I told the table, my sister's pale face and Daniel's colleagues' averted gazes burning into me. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I walked out, the warm Charleston night wrapping around me like a shield, the salty breeze cooling my skin. Daniel thought he'd scripted the end of our story, but I'd been writing my own for longer than he knew. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of his reckoning. Life before that night had been a tapestry of routine and sacrifice, woven with threads of love and ambition. Charleston's charm had always felt like home, the clip-clop of horse carriages on cobblestone streets, the vibrant hum of King Street's boutiques, the distant ring of church bells on Sunday mornings. My career as a real estate agent was my passion, a whirlwind of showing waterfront condos and colonial mansions to clients who trusted my eye for detail. I'd close million-dollar deals with a smile, like the time I sold a historic estate to a tech mogul after weeks of negotiations, celebrating with my team over oysters at the Ordinary. My office was a cozy nook downtown, its desk piled high with contracts, a window framing the bustle of passers-by. Our craftsman bungalow was my pride, a labor of love I'd renovated myself, sanding hardwood floors until my hands ached, planting a rose garden that bloomed crimson each spring. Daniel and I had bought it 8 years ago, a symbol of our shared dreams. He and I had laughed as we planted those roses, dirt smudging our faces, his hand warm in mine. He was a lawyer, specializing in corporate mergers, always polished in his tailored suits, his charisma lighting up any room. We'd met at a friend's wedding, his easy laugh drawing me in, and within a year, we were married, promising forever under a canopy of live oaks draped with Spanish moss. Our early marriage was a partnership forged through challenges. When Daniel lost his first job out of law school, I took on extra clients, working late nights to cover our bills while he studied for the bar exam. We'd stay up over coffee, dreaming of a future, a house with a big porch, children running through the garden, a dog we'd name Scout. When he landed his dream job at a prestigious firm, I celebrated, throwing a dinner party for his colleagues, even when it meant long nights alone while he chased promotions. Our social circle was vibrant, weekly dinners with friends like Sarah and Mark, hosting Daniel's partners for holiday gatherings, my meticulous planning ensuring every detail was perfect. I'd sacrificed, too, turning down a chance to join a top firm in Atlanta to stay in Charleston, believing our life was worth it. My sister, Emily, lived nearby, and our Sunday coffee dates on her porch were a ritual, filled with laughter over childhood memories. My best friend, Lena, was my confidant, always ready with wine and a sharp wit, dragging me to karaoke nights when work overwhelmed me. I thought I had everything, a career I loved, a home I'd built, a husband I trusted. But beneath the surface, the foundation was cracking, and I'd been too busy tending the roses to notice. The signs were there, subtle at first, like shadows creeping across a sunlit room. Daniel's late nights at the firm grew more frequent, his excuses polished but vague. Client dinners, he'd say, or a deal's closing. One evening, as we shared a quiet dinner at home, his phone buzzed relentlessly on the counter, the screen lighting up with notifications he quickly silenced. Work, he muttered, but the scent of a new cologne, sharp, unfamiliar, lingered when he leaned in to kiss my cheek. At a friend's barbecue, Sarah pulled me aside, her voice low. "Daniel's been spending a lot of time with someone from work," she said, hesitating. "Just thought you should know." I brushed it off, but the seed was planted. His wardrobe changed, new silk ties, a sharper cologne I didn't recognize. Once, I found a receipt for a jewelry store in his briefcase, dated weeks before our anniversary, and my heart leapt, hoping for a surprise. But no gift materialized, and when I asked, he shrugged, saying it was for a client's wife. I wanted to believe him, but the knot in my stomach tightened. The unease grew through daily routines. I'd check bank statements late at night, noticing small discrepancies, dinners at restaurants I'd never visited, a hotel charge I couldn't place. I'd hesitate to call him, fearing another curt reply. Then, a month before our anniversary, I saw a text from Rebecca on his phone, "Miss you already. Dinner tomorrow." He claimed it was a colleague, his smile too quick, and I let it go, hating the doubt that gnawed at me. I confided in Lena one evening, her brow furrowing as we sat over wine. "I saw him at a bar last week," she admitted. "With a woman, blonde, young. I didn't want to worry you, but," her words stung, but I rationalized them away, blaming my long hours, our stress, Daniel's past loyalty. I'd think of the time he surprised me with a weekend in Asheville, his arm around me as we watched the sunset, and convince myself I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew something was wrong, and the truth was closer than I realized. The real revelation came 3 weeks before the dinner. I'd been cleaning out the guest room, sorting old files for a tax audit, when I found a hidden folder in Daniel's laptop bag. Inside were bank statements for an account I didn't recognize, one he'd opened in his name alone. My hands shook as I scanned the pages, thousands of dollars transferred from our joint savings, charges for hotels in Myrtle Beach, restaurants in Savannah, even a weekend trip I'd never taken. Each line was a betrayal, a map of his secret life. Then I found the emails, accessed through a login he hadn't changed. Messages from Rebecca Lawson, a junior partner at his firm, filled with plans for their future, pet names, and a chilling line, "She'll be fine once it's over. She's stronger than you think." They were orchestrating the divorce announcement, planning to humiliate me in front of everyone we knew. I sat on the guest room floor, papers scattered around me, the air heavy with the weight of 10 years unraveling. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I started planning. That anniversary dinner was Daniel's stage, and he played it with cruel precision. His words, "I've found someone who truly understands me," hung in the air, a calculated blow meant to break me. The restaurant felt like a spotlight, every guest a witness to my humiliation. Emily's face paled, her fork clattering to her plate, her eyes wide with shock. Lena's blazed with fury, her hand tightening around her glass, ready to throw it. Daniel's colleagues shifted uncomfortably, Mark whispering to his wife, while Rebecca sat at a nearby table, her blonde hair catching the candlelight, her smile barely concealed. I saw my parents, seated near the window, their hands clasped in disbelief, my mother's lip trembling. The weight of their stares pressed against me, urging me to crumble, to give Daniel the spectacle he wanted. I remembered our wedding, his vow to stand by me, the way he'd held my hand through a miscarriage 3 years ago, promising we'd try again. How had that man become this stranger? But I'd spent years negotiating deals, reading rooms, staying calm under pressure. This was no different. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of my pain. I'd give him something else, a lesson in consequences. I barely slept that night at Lena's, the guest room's ceiling staring back as memories flooded in, our wedding under the live oaks, Daniel's vow to always stand by me, his hand warm as we danced. My stomach churned, meals left untouched on the counter. Emily came over, her eyes soft with worry, but her words, "Maybe it's a misunderstanding," felt hollow. I wanted to scream, to shatter the silence, but the weight of 10 years held me back, a tangled knot of love and betrayal. I thought of the bungalow, the roses I'd nurtured, the dreams we'd built. Could I have pushed him away, working too hard, focusing too much on our future? The guilt gnawed, but so did the truth. Daniel had chosen this, planned it, reveled in it. I visited my parents the next day, seeking advice, but found only sympathy. "We're here for you," my father said, his voice heavy, but their hugs couldn't erase the pain. I started journaling, pouring my anger onto the page, and found an old photo of myself at 25, before marriage, full of ambition. That woman wouldn't have stayed silent. I wouldn't either. The evidence I'd found in that guest room had changed everything. I hadn't confronted Daniel, not then. Instead, I'd spent those 3 weeks preparing, my real estate instincts kicking in. I'd hired a private investigator, Carla, a discreet woman with a no-nonsense demeanor. We met at a quiet coffee shop, the aroma of espresso grounding me as she slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos, Daniel and Rebecca at a rooftop bar, their hands entwined, his smile brighter than it had been with me in months. Another showed them at a Savannah hotel, her head on his shoulder, oblivious to the world. I studied them late at night, the images searing into my mind, each one a confirmation of the betrayal I'd feared. I consulted a lawyer, Diane Patel, whose sharp mind cut through my fog of pain. "He's siphoning marital assets," she said, reviewing the bank statements. "That's fraud. And the public announcement? We can use that for emotional distress." I opened a separate bank account, transferring my personal earnings to protect them, checking balances obsessively to ensure no more surprises. Most importantly, I'd rediscovered the prenup we'd signed 10 years ago, a document Daniel had insisted on to protect his future earnings. It included a fidelity clause, one I'd forgotten about, that would leave him with nothing if he violated it. I kept it all hidden, my insurance against his arrogance. That night, as I left the restaurant, the warm air felt like a lifeline, the salty breeze cooling my flushed skin. I drove to Lena's house, my hands steady on the wheel despite the fire in my veins. She was waiting, her anger matching mine. "He planned this," she said, pouring me a coffee, the mug warm in my hands. Rebecca was practically gloating. I nodded, the prenup burning a hole in my purse. "I know," I said. "But they're not walking away unscathed." Lena's eyes widened. "What's the plan?" I didn't answer fully, not yet. The pieces were falling into place, but I needed to move carefully. I spent that night on her guest bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Daniel's smug smile, Rebecca's knowing glance, the life I'd thought was mine. I thought of the time he dismissed my dream of starting my own firm, saying, "You're better at supporting than leading." That memory fueled me. By morning, I wasn't just hurt, I was resolved. Daniel wanted a new chapter. I'd write one that left him with nothing. I woke with a clarity that cut through the pain. The betrayal still stung, but it fueled my focus. I sat at Lena's kitchen table, my laptop open, the bank statements and emails organized in a folder I'd labeled Justice. First, I called Diane. File the divorce papers today, I told her, my voice steady. And include the fidelity clause. She was ready, having drafted the petition based on the evidence. We'll serve him at his office, she said. Maximum impact. I smiled, imagining his face when the papers arrived, his colleagues' whispers cutting through his polished facade. Next, I contacted my bank, freezing our joint accounts to prevent further transfers. Daniel had been using our savings to fund his affair, assuming I'd never check. He'd learn his mistake soon enough. I met with my financial advisor, Karen, in her sleek downtown office, the skyline visible through her window. There's another unauthorized transfer, she said, frowning at her screen. He tried moving $5,000 yesterday. I nodded, authorizing her to secure my retirement accounts and transfer the remaining joint savings to a trust Diane had set up. The prenup was my shield, but I needed every asset protected. The turning point came that afternoon when I remembered the house. Our bungalow was my pride, but it was also my leverage. I'd bought it before we married, using my savings for the down payment, and kept the deed in my name alone. Daniel had pushed to add his name over the years, citing equity, but I'd resisted, citing tax benefits I'd researched for a client. Now, that decision was my trump card. I met with Diane in her office, a haven of dark wood and leather, her voice steady as she outlined the prenup's power. The fidelity clause voids his claim to marital assets, she said, tapping the document. The house, your retirement accounts, even the joint savings, he gets nothing. We can demand repayment for the funds he misappropriated. I traced the roses on my notepad, remembering the garden I'd nurtured alone. Selling the bungalow felt like losing a piece of myself, but as I walked through it one last time, touching the petals, I knew it was my strength, not his. Diane suggested a letter to Daniel's firm outlining the affair and financial misconduct, to be sent only if needed. Carla's photos, Daniel and Rebecca at the Savannah Hotel, his hand on her back, were our leverage. The threat alone was enough. Over the next few days, I moved with precision. Diane served the divorce papers at Daniel's office, the process server describing his shock as she handed him the envelope, Rebecca's face paling beside him. My colleague Jenna handled the house showings, her excitement infectious as a young couple marveled at the rose garden, their offer coming within hours. I listed the bungalow for sale, keeping it from Daniel, letting him think he still had a home to return to. I sent an anonymous tip to our mutual friends, Sarah, Mark, others, sharing screenshots of his emails, the Savannah trip charges, just enough to let the gossip spread. Sarah texted, "I can't believe he did this," while Mark unfollowed Daniel online. Daniel's vague social media defense, a post about misunderstandings, was drowned out by silence. Lena and I met for coffee, her eyes gleaming as she recounted the whispers at a friend's dinner party. "They're done with him," she said, squeezing my hand. "You're doing this right." I nodded, the plan unfolding like a deal closing, each step deliberate, earned. The consequences hit fast. Daniel called me the day after the papers were served, his voice a mix of rage and desperation. "What are you doing, Charlotte? You can't just freeze the accounts and file for divorce like this." I let him vent, my silence a weapon, his words spilling over, anger, then pleading, then excuses. "Rebecca and I, it's not what you think. We can work this out." I laughed, sharp and unyielding. "You announced our divorce in front of everyone, Daniel. You stole from our savings for your mistress. Did you think I'd just nod and move on?" He stammered, his charm crumbling. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean to hurt you. I stepped closer to the phone, my voice cold. You meant every word at that dinner. You chose the stage. I'm choosing the ending. I hung up, my heart racing but my resolve firm. At his firm, the letter's threat sparked whispers, colleagues avoided him, a partner questioned his ethics, and the air grew heavy with scrutiny. The house sold within days, a cash offer well above asking price. I didn't tell Daniel until the closing papers were signed, transferring the funds to my new account. He showed up at Lena's that night, his face flushed with anger, his suit rumpled from a long day. You sold our house. How dare you? I stood in the doorway, unflinching, the night air cool against my skin. My house, Daniel. The deed was never in your name. You should have read the prenup. His jaw dropped, the realization hitting like a wave. You can't do this, he sputtered, his voice rising. I have rights. I stepped closer, my voice low, steady. You had a wife who loved you. You chose to throw that away. Now you get to live with it. I closed the door, leaving him on the porch, his protests fading into the night. Inside, Lena poured me a glass of wine, her grin wide. You're a force, she said. I smiled, but the victory was bittersweet, tempered by the ache of what I'd lost. The aftermath was a mix of freedom and struggle. I moved into a sleek condo downtown, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the Charleston skyline. I spent evenings arranging bookshelves, hanging art that spoke to my soul, hosting Emily for dinner as we cooked shrimp and grits, a Charleston staple, her laughter filling the space. At work, I closed a deal on a historic townhouse, the client praising my vision, a nod that felt like a reclaiming of myself. But there were quiet moments when the pain resurfaced, an old anniversary card found in a drawer, a song on the radio that used to be ours. I let myself feel it, knowing grief was part of healing. I attended a local festival with Lena, dancing under string lights, the joy of the moment grounding me. Yet, finding our wedding photo in a box, I hesitated, choosing to keep it, not for him, but for the woman I'd been. Emily and Lena were my anchors, hosting game nights and dragging me to art galleries, their support a lifeline. My parents called often, their guilt palpable. We should have seen it, my father said, his voice heavy. I didn't blame them. I'd been blind, too. Daniel's world crumbled. The prenup left him with his personal savings, depleted by the condo purchase, and no claim to my assets. Diane's letter triggered an internal review at his firm, and he was demoted, his partnership dreams shattered. Rebecca left him, her social media now filled with solo travel photos from Paris, no mention of their future. A local news article noted the condo's repossession, Daniel unable to make payments, a detail Emily shared with a grin. Our friends, once charmed by Daniel, distanced themselves, their invitations drying up. Sarah hosted a dinner I attended, and Daniel's name wasn't mentioned, his absence a silent verdict. I started mentoring young women in real estate, meeting a new agent, Mia, who soaked up my advice, her first deal a small victory we celebrated together. The work filled me with purpose, a reminder that I was building something new, something mine. 6 months later, I stood in my new office, a corner suite I'd leased after a record-breaking year. I'd chosen the space for its light, painting the walls a soft gray, my desk angled to catch the morning sun. I hung a low-country painting, its vibrant marshes a nod to Charleston's heart. My real estate business had grown, fueled by referrals and a feature in a local magazine. The interview was a whirlwind, sitting across from a journalist, sharing my journey, I felt pride swell. Mentoring became my passion, Mia landed her first deal, her gratitude echoing my own when I'd started. One evening, I ran into Daniel at a charity gala, his suit slightly ill-fitting, his charm dimmed by the weight of his choices. He approached me, hesitant, his eyes searching. "Charlotte, can we talk?" I looked at him, the man I'd once loved, now a stranger diminished by his own hand. There's nothing left to say, I replied, my voice steady. You wrote your ending. I wrote mine. I walked away, joining Lena at the bar, her laughter pulling me back to the present. He emailed me later, a half-hearted plea for reconciliation, but I deleted it without replying, the necklace now a pendant I wore for myself. That night, I sat on my condo's balcony, the city lights twinkling below, the sapphire pendant cool against my skin. I'd visited the bungalow's new owners last week, seeing the roses still blooming, their care a quiet closure. I sketched ideas for my own firm, a dream Daniel had once dismissed, now within reach. The pain of his betrayal was a faint echo, drowned out by the life I'd built, work I loved, friends who lifted me up, a future I defined. He'd thought he could break me, but he'd only set me free. What do you do when someone tries to dim your light? You shine brighter, claiming every word of your story until it's yours alone.